Imagine pulling into a regular gas station on your way to work. You get out of your car, and 2 out of every 10 pumps are just completely dead.
Right.
Like the screens are black, the card readers are slashed, and there's absolutely no one coming to fix them.
People would lose their minds.
Exactly. If that happened with gasoline, there would be riots. Consumers would be demanding, congressional hearings. But here we are in the year 2026, and for millions of electric vehicle drivers, a 78% reliability rate isn't some dystopian hypothetical. It's just their daily commute.
Yeah, it really is.
The expectation of just mindlessly fueling a car where you pull over, plug in, and it just works has completely fractured.
It has. I mean, we are living through a massive paradigm shift right now in how mobility actually functions. The whole conversation around electric vehicles has, matured. We aren't really sitting around analyzing 0 to 60 times or battery cell chemistry in the cars themselves anymore. The real central bottleneck, and honestly, arguably the most lucrative opportunity in this entire transition, is the infrastructure. It's the grid powering those vehicles.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. We take a stack of varied sources and distill the insights you actually need to understand the world around you. Today, we're immersing ourselves in the reality of EV charging in 2026. And to figure out the mechanics of this giant infrastructure puzzle, we're pulling from a pretty substantial stack today.
Oh, yeah. It's a big one.
We've got a massive Harvard Business School data analysis on driver reviews, federal guidance from the Wyoming DOT on the EVIA program, industry deep dives from Avisun and PowerSonic, market statistics from B-Charged EV, and some really detailed infrastructure reporting from TESMAG and Nevera Fuel Cells.
Which is great because it provides this comprehensive picture of an industry that is just attempting to scale at an unprecedented rate. We're going to examine the hidden constraints on the electrical grid, which are forcing some completely wild workarounds, and look at how the private market is trying to standardize this whole fragmented system. Plus, what the financial reality actually looks like for the end consumer.
And to really understand these crazy innovations hitting the market today, we first have to look at the immediate pain points that are driving them. Like, historically, the prevailing narrative was always range anxiety.
Right, exactly.
People were terrified of running out of battery in the middle of some desert highway.
Yeah.
But this Harvard Business School research led by Omar Asensio, it reveals that range anxiety is, well, it's largely a ghost of the past.
Yeah, batteries simply got bigger.
Exactly. Now, drivers are suffering from what they call charge anxiety.
And that is a very distinct psychological shift. Charge anxiety is basically the fear of navigating to a designated charging station, only to discover that it's broken, occupied, or just entirely inaccessible.
Which happens a lot.
It does. I mean, Asensio's team, they analyzed over 1 million EV charging station reviews. Yeah, written by drivers over 10 years across 72 different languages. They actually deployed customized AI models to parse all the nuance of that consumer sentiment. And that right there is where that staggering 78% reliability statistic comes from.
So public chargers in the U.S. are literally failing nearly a quarter of the time.
Pretty much.
And the reviews just paint this picture of severe infrastructure neglect. Like, drivers aren't just complaining about slow charging speeds anymore. They are documenting severed cables, software glitches that completely refuse to authorize a payment, and touchscreens that are just baked into obsolescence by the sun.
Yep, the hardware just sitting out there rotting.
And beyond the hardware failures, there's this literal physical turf war happening in the parking lots. The term ICED comes up constantly in these reviews.
Right, IC.
Internal combustion engine vehicles, basically standard gas cars just parking in designated EV spots and blocking them.
Which highlights a much broader issue of spatial planning, because when an EV spot is blocked by a non-EV, that charger effectively becomes a broken charger. You can't use it.
Right.
And even when a driver does successfully access a working port, the actual financial transaction is just fraught with friction.
The Harvard research characterizes the current pricing models as basically the Wild West.
Because the pricing is completely opaque. Gas stations have those massive illuminated signs on the highway, right? To the penny what a gallon costs before you even hit your turn signal.
Exactly.
But with EV chargers, drivers are pulling up, plugging in, and then discovering the rate through some proprietary smartphone app after the fact. I mean, one reviewer in the study documented a $21.65 charge just for a basic top-up.
Yikes.
They were literally warning other drivers to avoid the station entirely unless they were absolutely desperate.
And that opacity, it naturally leads to really inequitable development. The data points directly to the creation of charging deserts.
Yeah. Because the private market, if left to its own devices, naturally clusters all this infrastructure in high-density, affluent urban centers, places where utilization rates and therefore profits are obviously going to be the highest.
Right. And the study specifically flags Ferry County, Washington, and Wise County, Virginia. And we aren't talking about some unpopulated wilderness here.
No.
These are areas with thousands of residents, median incomes around $45,000, and standard 20-minute daily commutes. Yet they have zero public chargers. The private market just simply bypassed them.
It creates this totally self-fulfilling prophecy, you know. Residents in those counties hesitate to purchase EVs because there's no infrastructure.
Right.
And then the infrastructure companies absolutely refuse to build because there are no EVs. But breaking that cycle means we have to understand why these stations are so incredibly difficult to build in the first place.
Because a logical assumption for you listening at home would be, well, if demand is surging, companies should just pour some concrete, lay some wire, and start collecting money.
You'd think so.
But reading through the EVASIN guidelines, the brutal reality of utility integration really becomes apparent. The bottleneck isn't a lack of ambition, it's literally the physical capacity of the electrical grid.
Yeah, we have to remember, the power grid was largely designed for things like lighting, refrigeration, air conditioning.
Right.
It was definitely not designed to deliver the energy equivalent of an entire small neighborhood's daily draw into a single vehicle in 20 minutes.
That's crazy when you put it like that.
It is. And EVASIN's data really details the friction here. Say you want to install a standard 150 kilowatt fast charger at a commercial site. You cannot simply tap into the existing building's power supply. It almost always requires a dedicated medium voltage transformer.
And the wait times for those are just glacial. EVASIN notes that procuring and installing that utility upgrade takes between 12 to 24 months.
2 years, potentially.
Up to 2 years. And the cost ranges from $80,000 to $250,000. And that is before you even purchase the physical charging hardware itself.
Yeah, it's wild.
I mean, if you're a rural diner or a small-town grocery store wanting to add a charger, a $250,000 utility invoice completely annihilates any business case you had.
Absolutely. And that massive financial barrier has actually forced the industry to engineer workarounds specifically to bypass the utility companies. The prevailing solution right now in these constrained environments is the battery-buffered DC fast charger.
Okay, so let's break that down.
Basically, it places a really large lithium iron phosphate battery pack, typically between 100 and 300 kilowatt hours, right between the local grid and the vehicle.
Just to keep the math grounded for everyone listening, let's separate the flow of electricity from the storage. Because the kilowatts represent the speed, the flow of the energy. The kilowatt hours represent the capacity, the size of the tank.
Right. Good distinction.
So it's basically like having a dripping faucet.
Yeah.
If you're super thirsty and hold your cup under a dripping faucet, you're going to be waiting there all day. But if you let that faucet slowly fill a giant bucket over 24 hours, when you finally need a drink, you can just dump the entire bucket out at once.
That is exactly what the engineering mirrors. A small commercial site might only possess like a 50 kilovolt ampere grid connection. That's your dripping faucet.
Right.
It trickles power into the station's battery buffer continuously. So when an EV arrives, the internal battery discharges rapidly, blasting 150 kilowatts straight into the vehicle. The grid itself never actually experiences that sudden massive demand.
Which fundamentally changes the operating economics, doesn't it? Because EVASIN points out that commercial electricity bills heavily penalize peak power draw through demand charges.
Oh, massively.
Like utilities have to maintain massive power plants just in case everyone turns on their appliances at exactly the same time. So they charge commercial sites anywhere from $15 to $25 per kilowatt every single month just for the capacity to draw that power.
Right. So if a site operator pulls 150 kilowatts directly from the grid to charge a single car, the utility levies this huge penalty on their monthly bill.
Right.
But by utilizing that battery buffer, the grid only ever registers a slow, steady 50 kilowatt trickle. EVASIN calculates that just by avoiding those demand spikes, site operators can save between $18,000 and $36,000 annually.
But wait, if that faucet is only dripping 50 kilowatts to refill the bucket, what happens on Like Thanksgiving weekend when a dozen cars pull up in a 2-hour window.
Yeah.
That battery is going to empty out way faster than it can replenish. You'd just be sitting there with a completely dead station, putting us right back at the 78% reliability problem.
Exactly. And that is the primary operational limit of this tech. If a busy highway corridor station delivers more than, say, 2,000 kilowatt hours a day, a battery buffer becomes essentially useless. It absolutely requires idle time to recover.
Right.
Furthermore, the physics of rapid energy transfer generate intense heat.
Yeah. And isn't it incredibly wasteful to rely on massive lithium batteries just to bypass some utility paperwork? Because if you are aggressively cycling these batteries in 30 degrees Celsius heat, they're going to degrade.
Yeah, they will.
EVs notes they could lose 40% of their capacity in 5 years unless you invest heavily in liquid cooling systems. So you're basically creating a grid infrastructure problem for a chemical degradation problem.
It is very much a calculated compromise. For isolated sites or small businesses, managing that battery degradation is still financially viable compared to a $250,000 transformer upgrade.
Oh, point.
But for high-throughput cross-country travel, you're right. Battery buffers just cannot sustain the volume.
So if navigating utility bureaucracy and managing degrading batteries is the only way for the small operators to survive, it totally makes sense why the landscape is absolutely dominated by a company that already built its moat.
Yeah.
A company that secured its massive grid connections years ago. Tesla.
Yeah, Tesla. Their supercharger network operates at a scale that effectively makes it the backbone of long-distance EV travel in the United States right now.
Right.
TesMag data indicates they operate approximately 37,000 DC fast-charging ports domestically. That's 52% of all fast chargers in the country. And just to put their global output into perspective, they delivered 6.7 terawatt-hours of electricity in 2025 alone.
Which is mind-blowing. And 2026 really marks a structural shift because the proprietary nature of that network has basically dissolved. We are fully in the NACS era now.
Right, the North American Charging Standard.
Exactly. Nearly every major legacy automaker, from General Motors to Ford to Volvo, they've adopted Tesla's hardware standard, which grants all their drivers access to the supercharger network.
But integrating millions of non-Tesla vehicles into a single network introduces some real logistical friction.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, a Ford F-150 Lightning, for instance, has its charging port in a completely different physical location than a Tesla Model 3.
Which explains the whole hardware evolution we're seeing. The TesMag analysis highlights Tesla's rollout of their V4 chargers. They feature significantly longer cables to reach those various port locations so drivers don't have to park awkwardly across multiple spaces.
Right.
But I mean, opening the gates like this to everyone seems like a recipe for crippling congestion. Tesla owners already experienced crazy queues during peak travel holidays in 2025 when the network was handling, 2 million charging sessions in 5 days.
Yeah, so congestion at the older, smaller sites is pretty much inevitable. However, Tesla's strategy here relies on utilizing this huge influx of revenue from the non-Tesla drivers to fund aggressive, large-scale site expansions.
Okay.
The data actually shows that in 2025, Tesla added 353 new U.S. stations, specifically equipped with 10 or more ports. They are treating infrastructure entirely as a volume business now.
And that volume is underpinned by the shifting economic incentives that are details in the sources. So let's talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the OBBA.
Yeah.
This fundamentally rewired the consumer math. It eliminated the old federal EV tax credit, which used to provide upfront cash at the dealership, and replaced it with a deduction for auto loan interest on vehicles assembled in the U.S.
Right. And the mechanics of that shift mean a consumer who is financing a vehicle can deduct up to $10,000 in interest over the life of, say, a 60-month loan.
Instead of just getting the $7,500 off the sticker price immediately.
Exactly. It really alters the point-of-sale dynamics. But TesMag's analysis demonstrates that the operational economics still remain highly favorable.
Yeah.
If you evaluate the cost on a per-mile basis, charging an EV, whether you're at home or on a commercial network, it continues to be significantly cheaper than fueling a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle.
So the demand for reliable infrastructure definitely isn't softening. But even with Tesla deploying these massive 40-quart mega stations along the interstates, and rural operators utilizing their battery buffers, fixed infrastructure still has geographic and situational limits.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, a supercharger off the highway doesn't help a driver who miscalculated their range and got stranded in a state park. Or, a logistics manager trying to charge a fleet of delivery vans in a leased warehouse where the landlord won't let them drill into the concrete.
Right, and when fixed infrastructure cannot reach the vehicle, the market just decouples the charger from the ground entirely.
Yeah.
The mobile EV charging sector is expanding so rapidly right now just to fill these localized gaps.
Yeah, the Be-Charged EV Statistics Project, this mobile market, will hit $425 million by 2030. And the necessity is obvious when you look at the raw data.
Yeah.
AAA reported handling 160,000 EV roadside assistance calls in 2023 alone. Be-Charged EV is currently operating in over 250 cities, boasting sub-30-minute response times.
But it is crucial to define the actual parameters of mobile charging here. These units are not designed to replicate a supercharger experience or, fully replenish a depleted battery.
Right. I mean, a transit van simply cannot carry a large enough battery to fully charge a stranded SUV without weighing 10,000 pounds itself.
Exactly.
It's basically the modern equivalent of roadside service truck, bringing you a gas can on the shoulder of the highway. They deliver a recovery charge about 8 to 10 kilowatt hours. That takes roughly 30 minutes and provides 20 to 40 miles of range.
Just enough to limp the vehicle to a functional, fixed charging station.
Exactly.
And while roadside rescue is definitely the most visible application, companies like PowerSonic and Nuvera outline business models that extend way beyond emergencies. The industry is really transitioning toward this idea of charging as a service.
Which makes sense. I mean, imagine a massive 3-day music festival in a remote field. The organizers aren't going to petition the local utility for a medium voltage transformer just for one weekend.
No, never.
They can simply contract a fleet of mobile chargers for the event. Or consider enterprise fleets. A delivery company can hire mobile units to charge their vans overnight right there in the depot, entirely avoiding all those grid upgrade delays we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and the technological approach to mobile charging is currently bifurcated into two distinct philosophies. You have battery energy storage versus hydrogen fuel cells.
So a company like Uvesco, they build heavy battery-powered vans. The van arrives, connects to the stranded EV, and transfers power from its own internal battery. But that model seems to have a glaring limitation.
It does.
If the van's battery is only 60 kilowatt hours, it can service perhaps 5 or 6 vehicles before the van itself has to return to a depot and plug into the grid.
Exactly.
The rescuer is still fundamentally bound by the exact same grid constraints we've been discussing this whole time.
Which is exactly why Nuvera's HydroCharge product is so interesting. It utilizes a mobile hydrogen fuel cell generator instead. And a hydrogen fuel cell does not store electricity. It actually generates electricity right on the spot through a chemical reaction.
So as long as the operator can just refill the unit with hydrogen gas, it can run continuously. It doesn't need to sit idle for hours plugged into a wall somewhere.
Right. In demanding continuous use environments like a bustling shipping port or a massive construction site, a hydrogen mobile unit offers true grid independence. It bypasses that electrical bottleneck entirely.
So let's step back for a second. We have rural sites buying $250,000 battery buffers. We have Tesla building massive V4 plazas. And we have startups deploying fleets of hydrogen vans.
Yeah.
The sheer capital required to avoid these grid bottlenecks and scale this network is just staggering. How is this not completely bankrupting the industry? Like, where is the foundational money actually coming from?
Well, a really significant catalyst for this infrastructure build-out is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI. The federal guidance issued by the Wyoming DOT actually provides a very clear window into how this capital is being deployed.
Right, so the NEVI program allocates $5 billion to states to establish a network of chargers along major alternative fuel corridors. The government is essentially de-risking the physical construction by providing an 80% federal cost share for these projects.
Yes, but the most critical provision in that DOT guidance is not the funding for the concrete and the hardware. It's actually the long-term operational mandate.
Which is huge. The federal government is funding that 80% share for up to 5 years of operations and maintenance, too.
Exactly.
They know about the Omar Asensio Harvard study. They see the 78% reliability rate. They understand that subsidizing the installation of a charger is a complete waste of taxpayer money if the screen is dead and the cable is severed a year later.
And the guidance explicitly uses the term stranded assets. The federal government is actively paying operators to retain technicians, replace damaged components, and ensure software uptime.
It's basically a massive, targeted influx of capital designed to force a fragmented, unreliable network to finally mature into a robust utility standard.
It really is.
So, synthesizing all these sources, the landscape of EV charging in 2026 requires a really distinct strategy from you, the driver.
Yeah, it's not like the old days.
The mindlessness of the gas station era just hasn't translated to the electric era quite yet. Navigating this requires leveraging the cheap, slow drip of home charging whenever you possibly can. It requires understanding the sheer dominance and expansion of Tesla's highway network when you're covering long distances. And it requires knowing that mobile charging as a service actually exists as a fail-safe when the fixed infrastructure inevitably leaves a gap.
Yeah, you're basically witnessing the raw, chaotic phase of infrastructure struggling to catch up to consumer technology. The grid constraints are forcing some brilliant engineering workarounds, but those workarounds fundamentally alter the relationship between the vehicle and the energy source itself.
Which leaves us with a pretty compelling trajectory to consider. Where do you see this heading?
Well, as battery-buffered stations increasingly decouple from real-time grid demands, and these mobile hydrogen fleets prove they can bring energy directly to the consumer in temporary environments, we kind of have to question the longevity of the centralized refueling model altogether.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, will the 20th century concept of a gas station, a dedicated piece of real estate you must actively navigate toward, will that eventually become entirely obsolete? In the coming decades, will you ever actually drive your vehicle to a charging station, or will the infrastructure simply evolve to find you while you work, sleep, and live?
That is a profound shift to consider the next time you look at a traditional fuel pump. The physical environment of mobility is just being entirely rewritten. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you on the next one.